do not file your tax return until you watch this video. I'm going to give you 3 benefits for actually filing your tax return late after getting an extension. A lot of people think that filing an extension means that you failed at taxes, that you got your stuff in too late, and now you're having to file later in the year, and you should have gotten it done earlier. But some of the most savvy people actually file extensions on purpose for strategic reasons. When you think about tax planning, you might think about just a list of deductions, things that you can do to lower your taxes. Hiring your kids, renting your house to yourself, writing off your dog's grooming, or whatever stupid stuff you've heard of online. But a tax plan is more than that. A tax plan should be all the decisions that you make surrounding getting your taxes filed. It should include the timing of when you're going to file your taxes. Are you going to file by the deadline, or are you going to get an extension? How are you going to get your taxes filed? Are you using a professional, or are you using software? If you're using a professional, then when do they need your information if you're going to try and get it filed by a certain time? How are you going to get your taxes paid? Are you going to do direct draft? Are you going to pay by check? Or are you going to make quarterly estimated payments? All these decisions need to be made ahead of time. But most people don't even know what decisions there are to make about taxes. And so we came up with a PDF that is everything you need to make decisions on about your tax process. If you want a copy of that PDF to help you walk you through all those decisions, it's a simple fill in the blank, check the box type thing. Check out the link in the description. You put in the email address and you'll get that PDF emailed to you. Okay, so what are the 3 benefits of filing an extension? Benefit 1 is just the benefit of hindsight. You don't know what life has in store for you, and you can make decisions on your tax return that might impact future years. So let me give you just a simple example. If you have a business and you buy large equipment, computers, and things like that, the default is usually just to write it all off in the year that you buy it. There are certain provisions in the tax code that allow for that. But you do have the option sometimes of spreading that deduction out over a few years. Now, normally, if everything's staying the same, we really want the tax deduction earlier, because usually a tax deduction now is better than a tax deduction later. But let's say that you bought $10,000 worth of equipment in 2025 and you would have written it off. You would have taken a deduction for that in 2025. That would have lowered your taxable income for 2025 by $10,000. You would save your tax rate plus self-employment tax on that $10,000 deduction. But let's say you know that your income is really variable and you have some things going on and you're not really sure how they're going to pan out, but you know that things are going to be changing for the years moving forward. And so you decide strategically to file an extension for your 2025 tax return. You decide not to file your tax return for 2025 by April 15th. And by getting an extension, by filing for an extension, you get an extra 6 months to file your 2025 tax return. So June, July of 2026 roll around, you still haven't filed your 2025 tax return, but you have most of it prepared. And then something happens. You get a promotion at work, your business takes off, you land a huge client. Whatever the case is, maybe now you can see that in 2026 and moving forward, you're going to be in a much higher tax bracket. If that's the case, then it may be more beneficial to spread out that $10,000 deduction over a few years. Some of it is going to be deducted in 2025 at the lower tax rate, but the rest of it's going to be deducted in 2026 and ongoing at a higher tax rate. So the tax benefit of that deduction is higher over the longer term. Now remember, just by getting the extension doesn't mean that you're getting this benefit. You actually have to make these decisions. You have to know what your tax rates are going to be. So you need to be working with a tax professional to figure out what these are going to be instead of just filing a tax return actually giving you tax strategy. The next benefit of getting an extension is tax law changes. Whenever tax laws change, they usually get enacted during the year that they impact, and a lot of times the impact is retroactive to the beginning of the year. So you're operating most of the year without even knowing what tax law you're operating under. When the One Big Beautiful Bill Act or whatever it was passed last year in 2025, that got signed into law in July, I think. And there was a lot of guidance that still wasn't out until closer to the end of the year. So if you had filed your 2024 tax return early in 2025, then you didn't even know what tax law you were operating under for most of 2025. Whereas if you had gotten an extension for your 2024 tax return, then you knew what tax law you were operating under in 2025 to make better decisions on your 2024 tax return. This is similar to the first benefit of filing an extension. And I think the moral of the story is that your tax years don't live in a silo. Every year can impact future years. The decisions that you make on your tax return might impact future years' taxes. And so you can use that to your advantage. The third benefit that I want to talk about getting an extension to file your taxes is having more time to do things, specifically to fund things like an SEP. If you are self-employed, you have access to something called a Simplified Employee Pension, an SEP. This is basically a retirement account that you can contribute to and get a tax deduction for. Now, if you want to contribute to just a traditional IRA, you can do that, but you only have until April 15th, regardless of whether or not you get an extension. But with an SEP, you have until the extended deadline of your tax return to make a contribution to that SEP and have it count for the previous year. So if you're in 2026 and you get an extension of time to file your taxes to October 15th, 2026, you can make a contribution to your SEP by October 15th and still get to deduct that on your 2025 tax return. We have a client that we just finished their tax return, and without funding an SEP, they would owe, let's say, $10,000 in taxes. But if they fully funded their SEP, maybe they would only owe $7,000 in taxes. Well, they have the money to pay the $7,000 in taxes now by the April 15th due date, but they don't necessarily have the money available to them just yet to make that SEP contribution by April 15th. But they know because of their income streams that they will have the money they need for that SEP contribution by October 15th. So we are extending her tax return, having her pay in an estimate of what she thinks she's going to owe after making that SEP contribution. And then in the meantime, over the summer, she can be setting aside the money she needs to make the full SEP contribution by October 15th. Once she makes that SEP contribution, we'll file her actual tax return. And since she'll have already paid in the estimate with the extension, she won't have any taxes due. If something happens and she can't make the SEP contribution, then we file the tax return without that deduction and she just pays the difference in taxes. Or if anything else changes about the final tax return and she ends up having paid too much in taxes, then she gets the difference back as a refund. So getting an extension is a really cool way to use time to your benefit to be able to have more time to contribute to things that can still save you on the previous year's taxes. Now, I mentioned that we had her pay an estimate with her extension, and this is something I want to point out is really, really important. A tax extension is not an extension of time to pay your taxes. It's only an extension of time to file your taxes. The IRS still wants you to pay in an estimate of what you think you might owe by April 15th, even if you don't file your tax return until the extended deadline of October 15th. Ideally, by April 15th, your taxes are prepared and you know how much you're going to owe. And so you just make that estimated payment. And then if nothing changes, by the time you file your tax return, you're good. Or if something does change, then you either get a refund or you pay the difference. If your taxes aren't prepared and you don't know how much your taxes are going to be, so you don't know how much to pay, you could always just look at your previous year's taxes and use that as an estimate to figure out how much you should be paying in this year, assuming that not too much has changed from the prior year to this year. Now, all that said, all the benefits of having a tax extension, there are still reasons why you might want to get your taxes filed by the original deadline of April 15th. If you're trying to get a loan and you need proof of income, if you're self-employed, a lot of times the banks are going to want to see a filed tax return, not just an estimate of a tax return. So you might want to get your taxes filed early in order to have that data to give to the bank. If you're expecting to get back a large refund, then there's no reason to wait to file a tax return. File the tax return early to get back that refund instead of letting the IRS hold it all year long for you. They're not going to pay you interest on that refund. Finally, if it just causes you a whole lot of stress to not have filed your tax return and you really don't have any strategic reason for having to extend your tax return, and it's just going to make you sleep better at night to get your taxes filed before April 15th, by all means, do it. Don't cause yourself additional stress all year long just because you don't know if something might change and you might want to make a different decision. Quick story time that I swear is related to this, but it's not going to seem like it in the beginning. Our kids are homeschooled, and one of my sons was telling me about how he hates doing his biology work or he hates doing his science work because it just seems like so much. And then once he does it, he realizes it really wasn't as much as he thought it was. And so I told him one trick was not to think of it as I have to do all my science work, was instead to just think of what's the very first thing you have to do? Like, what's the simplest first step? Is it just open your notebook? Is it just open the computer? Then that's the first thing you're doing. You're not doing your science work. You're opening your computer. That's easy. And then once it's open, what's the next easiest thing? Maybe it's just logging into the website or finding the assignment. And that's easy too. And then it's the next thing and the next thing until the whole thing's finished. And for a lot of people, tax returns feel the same way. Getting your taxes done feels like this monumental thing. You have to gather all these documents. You have to find out where to send them. You don't even know what you're supposed to be getting or where you're supposed to be sending it. And what if you're missing something? And then you have to answer all these questions. You have to sign all these documents. And the whole thing is just not a pleasurable experience. But what if you had like an assignment book, like something that you could just pull up where you knew the first step was just pull up this document and then look at the first thing. And that's why I made that tax plan PDF that I want to give you. That's that first step, that first simple step where you're not filing a tax return. You're just pulling up your tax plan document. That's the first step. And then you can go from there. So if you want a copy of that, check out the link in the description. If you want help filling it out, my contact information is on there as well. And let me know in the comments, are you getting an extension of time to file your taxes, or are you getting your taxes filed by the deadline? And either way, was that a strategic decision for you based on your circumstances, or are you just doing what you think is best without really knowing why? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time.